Hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy. Breaking news, we have just had a magnitude 5.1 earthquake strike northern Texas near the border of Oklahoma. And it's not like we never get magnitude 5 earthquakes in Texas, so they are a fairly recent phenomena, most likely because of fracking. This is a big earthquake, one of the biggest in the historic record for this big state. So we are going to be talking about this magnitude 5, who felt it. It was quite a strong shaker for those near the epicenter, which is effectively Amarillo, but there's these tiny little towns across the area. This is a big area of oil and gas fracking. You see all the different pads here spread out across. So it was felt pretty wide, even going into Oklahoma City. Some people felt light shaking. Stronger shaking felt right in the immediate vicinity. But this is just the latest in a string of earthquakes that have struck around North America. I mean, of course, we had the doublet that struck Venezuela, that's South America, but right there, Caribbean Sea plate boundary. We had the 7.3 that struck Mexico. We've had a 6.0 that struck Baja, 6.1 that struck just to the northwest of Cuba in the Gulf. We had a magnitude 5.6 that struck Ukiah Willits, same day as Venezuela, just a few hours before. And so we've had this string of earthquakes across North America effectively. And it seems to me it's indicating that there is a larger energy buildup that's occurring underneath the continent. So we are going to talk about how we get these positive charge accumulations as a result of a variety of factors. For example, storms or waves hitting the coast can cause positive charge to accumulate. You get positive charge to accumulate before earthquakes. And then when you get a discharge, often when you get a discharge between this lithospheric current and the electrostatic field that it creates to the ionosphere, that's when we see big earthquakes. So if all these events are indicating that there's a larger electrostatic field that's forming for North America, then we could be looking at a bigger event. There's no guarantee that eventually something big will strike North America. That's effectively guaranteed thanks to plate tectonics and more. The question is when, and so that's why we're tracking these earthquakes as they happen in the recent history, of course going further back as well, but that really tells us and gives us a sense of, okay, are we building up to something? Because there certainly are trends in earthquake data that often you can use to forecast high magnitude earthquakes. We've done this before, Japan, Kamchatka, multiple other locations. Often you are given warning signs. And these ionospheric disturbances and changes to Earth's upper atmosphere, the ionosphere, which has plasma there, and these ELF, VLF transmissions, think like very low frequency radio waves, also the conductivity of the troposphere, the boundary layer where we live, changes all of these also often indicate that an earthquake is about to rupture. So we're going to go through some of that science. We're going to go through what's happening right now and look a little bit ahead. So hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stefan Burns. This is a live stream. If you're watching this on replay, hello. We may do a Q&A, we may not, depends on how I feel, but let's just get right into it. So just looking at our map, if we go to highest magnitude, you see that this 5.0 is the biggest for the United States. We did have a 5.1 down here, central mid-Atlantic ridge. I've actually been having quite a bit of activity along the Atlantic ridge over the past month, even a little bit less than that. But if we go to our 30-day view, you'll see that there's been quite a bit of activity. For example, this swarm down here, multiple magnitude 5s. And then we had, for example, this 5.6 right there, another 5.2 up top, some activity there near the Azores. And then we've also had this swarm in the northern section south of Iceland with multiple magnitude 5s. So I'm pointing this out because if you're going to see some sort of movement with North America, you probably need there to have been a bit of movement here at the spreading centers in the Atlantic, which is the other side of the plate boundary. So we've been seeing that. So that's important to point out. But we go here, we see that this is the strongest earthquake by far. There has been a 3.9 to the south that followed up afterwards about, what was that, 10 hours afterwards or so. But that's pretty far away. It's not really an aftershock, I would say. And you get these sort of earthquakes to hit Texas, fracking induced. But a magnitude 5 is significant. So let's just look at our map here, our interactive map, so we can see the shaking that was reported. A lot of people felt this. It kind of happened right around sunrise, I think maybe slightly before. But here is the extent of what was felt. So going into Oklahoma, even going further north there into Kansas, going down into, well, more like the middle of Texas, still northern Texas, but near Lubbock, but really strongly felt right in this area. And actually, I don't know why they have these lines colored the way they do, because we do see two reports from nearby that had the shaking categorized as strong. So right here, they categorize as strong shaking. So I feel like this would be pushed out a little bit further, especially in context of these did you feel it's here. Now, the majority are light shaking, you know, moderate shaking, for example, but we do get 3 reports of strong shaking right there with those yellow squares. So it appears that this was a bit of a stronger shaker than you would just kind of get at first glance by looking at this. And that also holds when you look at the responses going all the way out. So if I put on our 10-kilometer responses, you see these going all the way out. And we had people feeling this in Dallas. I mean, even a report there in Kansas City. So pretty far out, not going beyond that. One report there in Denver, if you can see that square. So I think this is a pretty significant magnitude 5, clearly. And it's right here in this area that there's a lot of fracking. And that's one of the main things that we see with fracking is that there's been more seismicity. We're going to look at that data in just a second. But first, let's just check this out. Here, we just see a graphic describing fracking-induced earthquakes. Large volumes of wastewater are produced from fracking, and then often that's pumped back in to these areas that were fracked. So you're actually creating fractures, right? That's fracking is fractures. And there are these slate and shale layers that exist pretty deep underneath, you know, Texas and a lot of the United States and a lot of parts of the world, actually. You're going down a few miles. It could, well, more like probably 2 miles, but, you know, 5, 6, 7 kilometers, shallower than that too. But this is where a whole bunch of natural gas is stored. And they're stored in little micro porosity vesicles and stuff. And basically they put this, they drill down, usually now they go horizontal, and then they inject this, this fracking fluid with also gritty materials like sand into the shale rock to fracture it and then hold open those fractures. Because you can imagine the tremendous stress that's in, right? The just compressional stress is huge. To hold those fractures open, the natural gas flows out. The thing with fracking is that's a pretty short-term phenomena. So you don't get gas from these fractured sites for that long. So that's why they have to keep putting in rigs. They have a really high initial output, and then the tail just like goes off to almost nothing. So that's why they're constantly having to frack over and over and over. And basically, you're just heavily fracturing these geologic layers, which are pretty important all across the continent for the most part. I mean, they're fracking almost everywhere in the United States and Canada. So there's also, you sometimes get earthquakes from the actual fracturing process, but usually what it is that after things have been fractured, when you're disposing of this wastewater, that's when you can often get these earthquakes. And of course, as a result of this fracturing, there's toxins and gas that goes up into water aquifers, and there's tons and tons and tons of reports of people turning on their sink and, you know, gas is coming out, or muddy water or whatever. You know, it's environmentally damaging. It's pretty environmentally polluting and damaging, but America wants energy independence, so that's why they do fracking. So earthquakes, though, are often generated by fracking, usually much smaller in magnitude, magnitude 1, 2, maybe 3, but they can get bigger. And as you build up these fracture networks, as you build them up, well, you can start to have larger earthquakes. And it's not like Texas or some of these places is completely atectonic, aseismic. You know, they have earthquakes, but what we see is that they're pretty much a recent phenomena as it relates to the bigger ones. So here we have a historic selection for just this area, okay? This is going back to the year 1900. So our earthquake catalogs are pretty woefully short. You know, let's make that clear. But going back then, we do have some records, especially for the bigger earthquakes. You know, think magnitude 5 and greater. And you know, we're not really concerned about what's going down here, but we see, for example, a lot of these earthquakes there in Baja, and you get magnitude 6s and 5s, etc. As I said, for all magnitude 5s and greater, we see the 6.3 there in 1928 down in Mexico. So that's the largest actually of the entire sequence. But if we really zoom in here, well, let's now next get kind of this out of the way. This is where you have a whole volcanic and seismic zone there. So you have the Rio Grande Rift that goes underneath New Mexico. You have the Socorro magma body, perhaps a supervolcano in the process of building. You know, it's one giant magma sill. It's huge. You see earthquakes here, 5.8. That's in 1906 when that's actually right with that magma body. So that's a volcano-related earthquake. 5.0 there, New Mexico, 5.1, 5.3, Colorado, 5.0, and then 1960. So you see that there's really not that many, okay? Now, if we really zoom in here, we see a lot of earthquakes in this area. 5.4, 5.2, 5.0, 5.0, 5.4. So you see kind of a sense of the magnitudes. And look at the distribution of this, okay? So we really zoom in. We see that this is 2020, 2022, 2023, 2025, 2025. All of these have occurred since 2020. And fracking really started taking off in the 21st century, actually more like 2010 or so. So you would think that if there was going to be magnitude 5s that strike that area regularly, that we would see like this at this frequency, that we would see them back in the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, everything else in between and forward and back, right? Well, we're not. Here we see some activity. This is 1931 at 5.8. Okay, so that's before fracking, right? But you do see it's on this known fault line there. And here, this 5.7 in 1995. So it is possible to get these earthquakes in Texas, but this area specifically you see is very clearly linked. Now, if we go more to the north here, we see these earthquakes as well. Look again at the time, 2022, 2024, 2024, all in the recent time frame. No big fault zones that are identified there. Of course, there's kind of like little faults everywhere, but we're really talking about generating new faults as a result of this fracking. And then here we see up in Texas and Oklahoma, where there's been some pretty big earthquakes. So here in Oklahoma, 2024, 5.1, 2016, 5.0, 5.8 in 2016. That's pretty unusual. 5.1, 2016, and here 5.0, 2026. So we only have 5 earthquakes for this location. And this 5.8 is pretty big. Let's see what the moment tensor plot says. So this was like a reverse strike slip, which is interesting. So this kind of thrust upwards, but mostly strike slip with them grinding past each other. That's clearly an example of how these earthquakes, whether or not they are induced by fracking, these earthquakes in this area can be felt quite strongly by people. And if I had to really put chips down, I would say that fracking is definitely influencing these earthquakes. Maybe the earth stress is coming from just larger plate tectonic forces kind of just impinging upon that area. But we know that fracking, it's very well studied, generates a lot of microseismicity and like lower magnitudes like 1, 2, and 3. And it's non-possible, as we're seeing, for them to generate up to magnitude 5. I mean, a very clear example of that is right here, all in the past 6 years, right? Just the time frame for this is almost all these are recent in these areas that are undergoing heavy oil and gas drilling. So that's important to note. Now, I do want to point out before we go further that right now we are in a coronal hole high-speed stream. This is known for earthquake activity. So we see our solar wind velocity has gone up here. It's now at 685 kilometers per second. We have not really entered into, oh, it looks like we just now entered into a G1 geomagnetic storm. So it took a while for that to occur. The solar wind velocity clearly needed to ramp up, but now we're in a G1 storm as a result of this fast solar wind, and our magnetic field in general is looking choppy, but a little bit more than normal. density is starting to go down. We can see kind of what this looks like here with this animation. Here's the coronal hole. As a high-speed stream sweeps by the Earth, it compresses Earth's magnetosphere. So we've been now in this regime for less than 24 hours, and we've just in general been experiencing this space weather on and off for many years now. Solar cycle 25 has had a lot of these coronal holes, which I can show you one right here. Here's the coronal hole that we're talking about. This imagery going back to the 20th of July, going up to today. You'll notice this sunspot group there rapidly growing, blasting off solar flares, and actually fracturing this coronal hole apart. Though by time it rotated to geoeffective, it already had its high-speed stream that was Earth effective out in front of the sun, sweeping by. But this may be the end of this coronal hole, as you see, because of 4493 right there. So I'm not sure how much longer this high-speed stream impact will last as a result of it having actively pushed away and recharging the plasma of the corona, the outer atmosphere of the sun. And there's been some other activity too, like a plasma filament launches off from down here later on in the video. And as you see, there it is. There's a whole bunch of cuts in the video how to get rid of to make it so it's not flashing you guys like crazy, and because there's different things. But here we see our 131 angstrom view with the sun. This shows the solar flare activity very nicely, and there is 4493. So I'm also showing you this because these explosions on the sun, known as solar flares, not only do they have the chance to launch solar storms out to Earth, which is an actual body of plasma traveling at like 500, 600, 800 kilometers per second. They can be slower and faster too, but in general, it's about 500 kilometers per second. Well, light is traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second. So when you get this explosion in this burst of light energy across the high frequency spectrum, X-ray, extreme ultraviolet, etc., that reaches Earth in 8.3 minutes. That instantly charges the ionosphere. And while we see this connection between the ionosphere and earthquakes, which is what we're going to discuss more. So we have had quite a lot of solar activity over the past 3 days. We didn't get any high M class or even X class flares. That was a possibility. It didn't happen. We had some M class flares that topped off at like the 3 point something level. So 3.6 it looks like, and 3.5. But multiple M class flares, ton of C class flares as a result of 4493. And all this is just in general amplifying the global electric circuit and causing more geomagnetic volatility on Earth. Because right now, again, we are in a G1 minor geomagnetic storm. So Earth's magnetic field is oscillating more than normal. The ionosphere is more charged up than normal. And we're seeing earthquakes in, kind of unusual places with Texas. And that's not the only location either. We can look at it here with Google Earth, and I can show you some of the earthquakes that have been a bit unusual recently. So here's our 5.0, Texas, 23rd today, July 2026. Hello and welcome. And here is what's been happening nearby. So really notably is this doublet that occurred, the 7.5, 7.2 in Venezuela on the 24th of July. There's still tens of thousands missing from that. They're not going to be found. And so there's the death toll from this is in the tens of thousands. It's really, really very sad. We had same day, slightly beforehand, actually, this historic magnitude 5.6 that struck Ukiah Willits. So really in Redwood Valley, but you see it's basically kind of in between Willits here and Ukiah, closer to Willits. And I had an email come in from a gentleman named Frank. And so thank you, Frank, for the email. If you're watching this, it's appreciated. He messaged me that springs are flowing again and well water production is way up for those in Redwood Valley to Willits, and that the Russian River is flowing right now, which is normally when it's dry. So often the Russian River goes dry, or parts of it go dry or close to dry during the summer. Having been up there a bunch during that time, I know what he's talking about. Right now it's flowing very strongly, and we get all this well water production to go up, and also lots of natural springs are coming up after this earthquake, which is the largest ever recorded for this area. Now, it's not going to be the largest probably ever in the history of the Earth, but the largest for our record. So it's a historic earthquake. occurred the same day as Venezuela, a few hours before, showing this connection in time at a minimum. And we also see a connection in time with 1812, with there being big earthquake activity in Venezuela and also Southern California. But there's other earthquakes that have occurred too. This 7.3 there on the 17th of July, not too long ago, Mexico, near Guatemala, that was a big earthquake. And this kind of highlights some of the things that we'll be discussing. I can show you that right now. If we go to my X account, we'll see a few interesting things. So we had this big eruption from Fuego volcano on the 19th of July. If you give that a look, see that? Big eruption from Fuego. Well, Fuego is just 250 kilometers away from the epicenter, that 7.3, okay? So just 2 days later, and then following that, actually, we will see this large lightning storm that was hovering over the volcano, Fuego, back on the 21st. So you have the 7.3 earthquake strike on the 17th, then you have Fuego, this spectacular eruption on the 19th, and then you have this lightning plasma storm hovering over the volcano on the 21st. All this is showing how electric charge accumulates in the earth. And so I wouldn't take those three things and say they're completely unrelated. They're certainly connected together in some sense energetically. It may not be 100%, because volcanoes sometimes do volcano things, earthquakes do earthquake things, and storms do storm things. But you see them all closely clustered in time, and we know that Fuego has been photographed with fantastic volcanic lightning before. We know that earthquake lights can pop up from big earthquakes, etc. You know that they're connected together in some sense in the electric field and these rock stress currents. So we'll talk about that more. But yeah, so we had that 7.3, but we've also had this 6.1 there. This is back in June, a very unusual earthquake, the strongest ever observed in the Gulf. That was a 6.1, and the others were located kind of like in these areas, but this is a big earthquake for this location, reverse thrust, push up from deep below, pretty unusual. We had this magnitude 6 here, strike in Baja. This isn't necessarily unusual, but it's another notable earthquake that's occurred during this time frame of June and July. And we also had this 5.7 there going back to April with this earthquake swarm at Silver Springs. So I wanted to mention that because that's a pretty big earthquake for that location. Now, in addition to this, we will see that we are right now having an earthquake swarm in Brawley. So this started up the same time as Texas. So right at, I mean, look at this now. It's 42 earthquakes in Brawley. And this is right where the San Andreas kind of undergoes this splay and then picks up again right here. So often faults, they'll have this junction where they kind of leap across. And this is like this fracture zone that results. And so we get these seismic swarms in Brawley in this area. This one just being a mile off the San Andreas. So, you know, if you were to talk to the Southern California Seismic Observatory, someone there, they'd be like, it's not on the San Andreas. But when it's a mile away from the San Andreas, whatever fault it happens to be on is directly connected into the San Andreas. And it's really as a result of the San Andreas, and it's being governed by the San Andreas. So yeah, this isn't happening exactly on the San Andreas, but it's 1 mile away on an adjacent fault system that helps to connect the two strands together. Okay, and the Salton Sea being in this location is not a coincidence. We often see these sort of bodies of water right at important fault junctions or just along faults in general. The Rio Grande is an example of a river that is over a rift valley, and also the Mississippi is an example of a big river that's over the Rio Foot Rift with New Madrid. So that's starting up right at the same time as Texas. You know, they're pretty far apart. I wouldn't say they're linked directly, but temporally it's interesting. I look at that just the same, you know, this earthquake swarm in Brawley in Texas, just the same as I looked at the 5.6 with Venezuela. There's just more of a deeper universal connection, let's say, that's perhaps springing to our attention there, but maybe not necessarily directly tectonically linked because, you know, this 5.6 triggered Venezuela. That, you know, it's not that, but it's often we get these interesting linkages temporally in time. So that's showing that, you know, effectively we got some activity here in California popping off with Brawley, and it does this every now and then, but it's worthy of watching. Here we see our earthquakes going for 2026. And again, it's kind of the same map I showed you on Google Earth. We see our high magnitude 7s here to the south, and then we see magnitude 6s here, and then magnitude 5s there, right? That's an interesting progression. Yeah, the magnitude 7.2, 7.5, magnitude 7.3, here's your 6.1, there's your 6.0, and here's your magnitude 5s. So it really looks like there's a strong electrostatic field that's building up in this area, and it appears to be getting stronger here, this magnitude 5.0 in Texas being an indicator of that. Again, you know, the actual potential for that earthquake to occur was likely as a result of now all that shale rock being fractured, and so there just simply being a fault plane for it to rupture along. But you need stress to build up on a rock. You need that strain to accumulate for then the rupture to occur. So you can get the reverse piezoelectric effect to induce stress into a rock, because an electric current passing through a rock can actually cause mechanical deformation, physical deformation. That's the reverse piezoelectric effect. The regular piezoelectric effect is that you squeeze a rock, right? You put stress or strain upon a rock, and it'll then spit out an electric signal. So you take a quartz crystal and you squeeze it, and a little electric signal will come out. And that sort of piezoelectric effect is used in electronics everywhere. So the reverse piezoelectric effect is very, very interesting. One thing we'll go back to that. So let us now look at some of what's happening around and some of the science behind these electrostatic charges, all right? So we will begin by looking at our atmosphere and just understanding what's conductive, what's not conductive. So we have the height of the atmosphere here. So this is right there, 1 kilometer up, going all the way to 10,000 kilometers up. This is the ionosphere. This is the thermosphere. This is going out into space now. Once you're 1,000 kilometers up, you're really getting out there. The planetary boundary layer is 0 to 2 kilometers. So that's just a part of the troposphere, but this is where the atmosphere is the densest and also in general the most neutral. So it's very, very resistive and low conductivity there. Then you have the troposphere. This is in general the lower layer of the atmosphere where you have all the weather. That goes up to about 10 kilometers. Then the stratosphere, where planes fly, goes from 10 to, what is this, about 50. Then you have the mesosphere. The mesosphere is where you have meteorites burn up if they're coming in, or space junk, satellites, etc. Anything that's coming in from space will usually burn up in the mesosphere. If it's big enough, it can then continue on down. And then you have the ionosphere start up in the mesosphere, really about 50 kilometers up. You have the D region, the E region, then the F region is where the conductivity is the highest. See the electron density, right? Here's the electron density. You notice it's very, very low here in the troposphere and the planetary boundary layer. And then it does go up dramatically, orders of magnitude, multiple orders of magnitude as you get to the ionosphere. We see that very clearly here off to the right. So you see that conductivity. And if you look, we see it's around, what would this be, 10 to negative 13 or so. And then as you go up, it really increases dramatically as you then get to the ionosphere, and it actually keeps going. And then there's different regions. But the conductivity in general just increases exponentially as you go up into the atmosphere. So what has been shown is that there's a lot of connections between the ionosphere and earthquakes. We often see these changes to the ionosphere, these traveling electron disturbances or ionospheric disturbances, TIDs. We see changes to the electron content of the ionosphere, plasma bubbles and earthquake lights, and a whole bunch of unusual things that people are still kind of scratching their heads over. One good example of that is what we observed with the 5.6 magnitude earthquake that struck Alum Rock in 2007. So here they have a whole network of air conductivity meters in the South Bay for the Bay Area near San Jose, that area, right, Santa Clara. And here's the time of the earthquake, the 5.6. Keep in mind, this isn't a big earthquake. 5.6 is significant, but this is not a magnitude 8 or something, okay? But we see that our background level is 200 ions per cubic centimeter. And that's probably pretty normal. Then we see, and look at the time here, okay? So this right there is, we're looking at, what would that be? 24 hours right there, and then 24 hours. So we're looking at almost 2 days of data there. You see this spike up, kind of goes back down, but still elevated over baseline. And then the readings for the conductivity across the San Jose area went off the charts. Then once it came back down, shortly afterwards, boom, there's your magnitude 5.6. And this is highly anomalous. It actually went off the charts because the meters couldn't pick up and actually characterize the level of ionization anymore, right? It went off their own ability to read it, their scale. So we don't know how high this went, all right? Now we can see this very clearly on the other side, zoomed in section here, right? That box right there is zoomed in, and we see just how rapidly this increased and also the waves, almost indicative that there was a pulsing motion to this, right? Which is an electromagnetic thing, right? You have this long period electromagnetic wave that's pulsing this ionization until finally it goes off the charts. Here we see our ionosphere electron density profiles. And this is for starting up at 60 kilometers. We see that there are 4 different profiles here. We see our solar maximum daytime profile, our solar maximum nighttime profile, so red and blue. Then we see how different the conductivity of the ionosphere is during solar minimum. So with yellow there, that's solar minimum daytime, and then solar minimum nighttime. You have the ionosphere being more charged with plasma during the day because of light radiation. You know, this EUV, X-ray, this ultraviolet light charges up the ionosphere with more plasma. At night it goes down, and you see in general, because solar maximum has more EUV and X-ray flux, it goes up. So you have a stronger electric potential of the ionosphere during solar maximum, or just in general when there's a lot of solar flare activity, right? This is an average for solar maximum, which is when there's more solar flares. When you have a lot of solar flares, you have a more charged ionosphere, it's more conductive. And you see that again, it goes up as you increase in altitude. So we're doing order of magnitude jumps here in the electron density as you increase. The D region is the lowest. The E region there goes up to about 120 kilometers, and then you start to get the F1 and F2 regions going about 150 kilometers and above. So we've seen a few interesting things as it relates to this. We can kind of go back now and check out storm activity around North America. Just over this is a loop for not too long of a time frame, but we see Tropical Storm Bertha. I want you to notice that Texas, in the epicenter of this location for the magnitude 5 earthquake near Amarillo, is like right here. And look at Tropical Storm Bertha sweeping by, and then we also notice these thunderstorms first forming, vortexing, and then sweeping across Kansas there. Okay, so going like this. Well, directly in between the two is that magnitude 5. Now, what's been shown is that acoustic gravity waves, or AGWs, they are these traveling disturbances in the atmosphere that propagate from the boundary layer and the troposphere up to the ionosphere. So they are a physical mechanism that connects the lower level of the atmosphere to the ionosphere. And again, I've mentioned about how we've seen ionospheric disturbances and a bunch of pre-earthquake phenomena with earthquakes, okay? Well, we have these storms on both sides. This one's certainly producing acoustic gravity waves because it has that cyclonic nature to it. It's just a tropical storm, but we'll see the visual imagery in just a moment. But we have both of these pumping out these gravity waves, you know, perhaps causing disturbances to the ionosphere over this area, and then we get this magnitude 5. We've also recently been having storms here off Baja and in the Pacific, kind of going up north towards California. Just in general, there's been a lot of storm activity around North America recently, and let's look now at our map. Because of this super El Nino, we maybe even call it a Godzilla El Nino here. So here we see Tropical Storm Bertha now really coming in. Houston's starting to get hit. We see this new guy there, Fausto, category. It's actually category 1 now. So it's strengthened. And we had a LIDA not that long ago. If we go back, Elida should pop up. I think she did for a second here. There's Elida. She swept up like this. Has some nice vorticity to her. You'll see that right there. Nice spiral to it. And then just in general, because the water right now off the coast of Mexico and the United States is so warm, and the Gulf is always warm, right? We're getting a lot of cyclonic activity on both sides. So when you have these sort of strong weather storms and systems in place, not only are those gravity waves influencing the ionosphere and actually structuring the electron density of the ionosphere, they can do that. You also have stronger swells and waves hitting the coast. That generates positive charge accumulation in the ground surface. And also big storms pull up positive charge from the ground itself. That's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. So we can give that a look right here. Here is a combined graphic. We see the positive charge accumulation as a result of strain dynamics. So you have stress-induced current before and or during an earthquake, and here showing a subduction zone, here it's showing a different tectonic setting, more extensional, like a basin and plain, like horse grabbing setup. Anyways, you see these positive charges, they accumulate at sharp points. So you'll get positive charge in general to accumulate near the surface, but if you have a sharp point, that's when it really strongly accumulates. Well, what's Fuego volcano in Guatemala, which we looked at earlier, which had that eruption on the 19th, just 2 days after the magnitude 7.3, 250 kilometers away in Mexico to the west on the 17th? Well, it's a really sharp point. So you have the 7.3 that in general is causing this positive charge accumulation. Then you get this volcano to erupt because, well, you probably had a lot of positive charge build up at the very apex of this volcano. And then 2 days after that, you get this massive thunderstorm and lightning discharges and plasma discharges directly on top of Fuego. Really perfect example of what I'm talking about. So if you scale this out to a larger region, because you take the 7.2 and 7.5 earthquakes in Venezuela into context, and then the overall 7.2 for Mexico, the 6.1 Cuba, the 6.0 Baja, the 5.6 Northern California. We've also had activity up in the Juan de Fuca plate and near British Columbia. So you take all that into context, it really seems that we are right now in this midst of a large positive potential building up, a larger electrostatic field, and that then actually pushes up into the lower ionosphere, the D region. So if you have, they've actually observed these electrostatic fields from earthquakes. So it's not like we've never observed them before. We've observed these electrostatic fields, right? It's just like electrostatic. That's almost like you're walking around with your socks on carpet, right? And your hair gets frizzy and you can zap things. That's what it means by electrostatic field. It's this potential that builds up. And you already have the ionosphere at 250,000, 300,000 plus volts, and the ground surface is 0. But you have this field that runs between the two because they are connected, a vertical electric current that typically is about 100 volts per meter. So you go up a meter, it's 100 volts. You go up another meter, it's 200 volts, the potential. And as you get out of the troposphere, the conductivity dramatically increases as a result because you're getting closer and closer to the ionosphere. Well, they've measured these electrostatic fields before and during and after earthquakes and seen that not only can they have strengths of 100, 500, 1,000 volts, but even like 2, 3, 4 kilovolts. It can be very strong. And what that does is it influences the atmospheric conductivity going all the way up to the D region and even the E region, such that it can influence the boundary between the ionosphere and the lower atmosphere that's less conductive, because the ionosphere is a dramatic increase in conductivity. Now the global electric circuit and plasma processes are really in play. So by these electrostatic fields that form can really push up and alter that boundary layer by 1, 2, 3 kilometers, and that can influence the natural resonant characteristics of the Earth in terms of her Schumann resonances. That's why we observe these Schumann resonance anomalies often before earthquakes, because you have this electrostatic field building that's altering the waveguide in between the ground surface and the ionosphere at that moment. And so the Schumann resonances in that location are deviated off of normal in their frequency, their power, etc. So here's the conductivity of the ground. You have all the different types. You see that salt water is very conductive. In general, the only thing more conductive would be these ore minerals like sulfides or iron directly, like metal is very conductive. Metal is actually a solid plasma. There's so many free electrons. And for example, copper, you can consider a solid room temperature plasma. It's really cool. But you see that as you go back here, you start to get reductions in conductivity. For example, basalt, granite, marble metamorphics, they can be pretty low conductivity, but the atmosphere itself is way lower conductivity. So the lower part of the ionosphere, we can go back to our graphic here. The lower part of the ionosphere is going to be pretty high in well, this is showing our electron density. Maybe I show this one. This one should show it. Yeah. So you notice that once we get up to 50 or so, right, we're looking at about 10 to -8 for our conductivity. Well, the most resistive geologic minerals are also around 10 to -8. The atmosphere itself, though, is 10 to -14 Siemens, S-E-I-M-E-N-S, or even like 10 to -13. If there's a lot of salt ions in the air, you're right near the coast, the ocean, you get slightly higher conductivity in the boundary layer, the troposphere, as a result. But in general, 10 to -13, 10 to -14 Siemens per meter. So it's like a 5 to 6 order of magnitude jump going to the ionosphere or going down to the ground surface. So actually, the Earth itself is pretty conductive. It's not conductive as compared to like copper, but as compared to the atmosphere in between, it's very conductive. So it's almost a capacitor setup. It really is a capacitor setup where you have electric charge build, and sometimes you can get this discharge to arc between them, and that will finally get it to go. So we see this happen with earthquakes. We see that this occurs with earthquakes, and we could be in for a bigger earthquake for North America, I think, soon as a result of these dynamics, because seems to me, nothing's guaranteed, but seems to me that we are seeing a very clear pattern here with our earthquake activity extending into North America, and this magnitude 5 in Texas being the latest now. You know, it's a big earthquake for that location. Is it big compared to the 7.5 Venezuela? No. But for that location, it's one of, for that location, it is right there with the strongest earthquakes ever observed. So by this sort of anthropogenic process of fracking, you can see, you know, can start to alter larger geophysical and geologic systems that exist. You know, we as humans do have an impact on this planet. That's the first thing to realize if you're ignorant to that, and or you just simply don't want to believe it for whatever reason, you got to let it go. That is simply the truth. We're not the most important factor. That would be the sun, that would be the cosmos, but we are not a zero factor now, right? Life has never been a zero factor for the Earth. I mean, the great oxygenation event is what caused all the iron in the oceans to precipitate out into red iron banded deposits, right? And for us to have oxygen in the atmosphere. Life has never been a zero component to geology. If you actually do the reading, the research, the study, you see that we probably wouldn't have the planet that we do without life. Okay? And so just as we can have, you know, perhaps deleterious effects on the Earth, we can also have positive effects on the Earth. I wouldn't really call fracking a positive effect, but, you know, things like planting trees, etc. But we certainly do impact the planet with what we're doing. Another good example of that is how we are redistributing mass on the planet due to mining and quarrying, and also hydroelectric activities with dams and stuff. There's been some studies suggesting that we're actually displacing more mass now on the planet than natural processes. For example, glaciers melting, or, you know, rainfall patterns, etc., because we're just so active with that. And we see this connection between the atmosphere and, well, the Earth itself. You can actually measure based off of the wobble of the Earth, like the Chandler wobble and these nutation rhythms, that when there are big changes to the atmosphere and circulation, you get the time of day on Earth to alter slightly, speed up or slow down. So there's this connection between the angular momentum that's stored within the atmosphere and the angular momentum of the Earth. Now, if you look at earthquake records and you do a power spectral density plot for them, so basically you're looking at the kind of the reoccurrence frequency for earthquakes, you'll notice a earthquake rhythm that pops off that's about 430 days in length, this wavelength. That's the Chandler wobble. The Chandler wobble, Earth's free nutation, its free oscillation generated by all these different inputs, is 433 days. So we see that record in earthquake data. So there is a direct connection between the Chandler wobble and earthquakes. And we see this connection between the atmosphere and how that is changing and the Chandler wobble. We also see how, well, you affect the momentum and all the different atmospheric dynamics as a result of storms and these acoustic gravity waves and Rossby waves and all these gravity waves in general. So, and we see how they affect the ionosphere, how the earthquakes affect the ionosphere, how they can alter the lower levels of the ionosphere. So we see all these systems are super interconnected. And right now we're seeing that there is clearly a lot of stress around this region of the world. Now, of course, a lot of it's been released now. The 5.2, or sorry, the 7.5, 7.2, 7.3, a lot of energy has been released there. But I'm not sure the 6.1, the 6, the 5, 5.6, etc. I'm not sure that's really showing a big release of energy. Maybe it's more so just foreshock activity kind of giving us a heads up. Because if you have big releases of energy here with this Caribbean Sea Plate, look at how that junction goes right where that 7.3 is. This is also where the 8.2 was in 2017. Biggest earthquake ever observed for that location, Mexico, right? Well, if you get big shifts down here, you're going to have big shifts up there. And that is, I think that's coming pretty soon. There's more to talk about as it relates to the San Andreas as well. I'll save that for a different video. But we see the interconnectedness of all these systems. And this could also explain why a lot of people are experiencing symptoms of like ear ringing or just, you know, weird like bio effects. It could be bioelectric. It could be because there's this larger positive charge that's building up in the area. Because a lot of people are commenting about this on my videos quite frequently, but sometimes they're like, it must be the solar activity. It's like, we haven't had a big solar flare in like a week, and the geomagnetic activity is at 0 and has been for 5 days. So it's not the solar activity, right? A lot of people, they think it's the solar activity. It's not always the solar activity. It can also be more terrestrial influences as well. That could be an explanation for that. I think a lot of people just need to work on their health as well, if we're being fully 100% honest. But there are these biophysical connections between the Earth, ourselves, the sun, the cosmos, and more. So my impression is that a pretty strong electric field is building up here, and that's fundamentally all plasma, right? You can get this large, very low density plasma structure that has, for example, imagine like a cylinder, right? It have its own internal magnetic field being impinged upon by the external field, and that's going to cause it to undergo evolution. For example, pinches and these plasma, these sort of plasma structures also can form vortices and more. A lot of really interesting astrophysical research on that. Well, the Earth is in the astrophysical environment. We're not separate from that. So plasma like that can exist anywhere. Plasma can go straight through material, walls, whatever, right? It's not limited in the normal way that 3D materials are, like solids, you know, liquids, gases. You know, plasma is not really the fourth state of matter. It's actually the first state of matter. 99.9% of all the matter in the universe is plasma. So it's really plasma, then gas, and then liquids, and then solids. Solids are the fourth state of matter, really, by that reckoning. So yeah, that is your update for today. I wanted to fill you all in on what's been happening. Big magnitude 5 striking Texas here, felt by quite a lot of people. Probably not a foreshock. It's probably the biggest earthquake that will occur maybe we get some aftershocks, but clearly no swarm activity happening from it. If we go back here, we don't see any aftershocks from this yet. So it's probably just a one and done. Maybe a couple others pop off afterwards. We'll wait and see. But there's always a lot of activity happening in Texas now as a result of fracking. The whole area is becoming more geologically active. In general, I don't think that spells good, especially for people, you know, have homes and don't want their homes to get destroyed. Like, it doesn't spell good. It also doesn't spell good when you have a huge fault system that can produce magnitude 8s here with New Madrid. Then you have a big fault system there with the Rio Grande Rift that can produce big earthquakes and also has all this volcanic activity. And then you have this other big fault system there with California. This is supposed to be kind of that buffer, right? It was supposed to be the atmosphere in between the Earth and the ionosphere. Now we kind of don't have that anymore. And if you were to have a more conductive atmosphere, right, you can have that equalization between the ionosphere and Earth's surface, the lithosphere, and the crust more easily. And well, strong electric currents passing through rocks can, you know, cause there to be that actual mechanical deformation of the rock. And then that stress and strain accumulates and boom, you then get that rupture. So it's also not a good sign, you know, geologically, that we've gone in here in the span of 20 years, heavily fractured this bedrock such that it's going to, I mean, I don't know how it's going to repair. I guess eventually it will repair itself. I guess we don't really know, but we're taking the center of our continent there, or the United States at least, and just basically blasting it apart. Can't be good, because the bigger earthquakes rupture along larger faults. So you start to build the potential for larger faults to get connected, simultaneous ruptures. That's the big fear with Cascadia and San Andreas. And actually here, we just had a 4.2 pop off here in the Juan de Fuca plate. But one of the big fears is that you get this magnitude 9 to hit and it also ruptures the San Andreas simultaneously, because one sets the other off. It could be the other direction too. So we know these sort of simultaneous ruptures exist. Question is, can they also exist maybe going some of these other directions? A lot of faults, I'll just finish by saying a lot of faults aren't discovered until the earthquake happens. So just because you see this map here and you don't see something on the map doesn't mean certain pathways don't exist. Certain faults, certain energy flows, they certainly can. Faults are basically discovered when earthquakes happen. And so there's a lot of stuff happening under the surface that we're totally unaware of, that one day we'll be told, you know, we'll be made aware of, because some big event will occur. Question is it 50 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 10,000, whatever? We don't know. But this is all what's happening. So a few super thanks have come in. We'll do a Q&A there. I'll take some from the general chat too, but nothing super long. Thank you, Niurka, for the super thanks, and Texas Even Star, thank you as well. John Hutch, thank you for the super thanks from Croatia. God bless. Nancy Ferrari, if all the solar energy continues to launch our way, how much can our physical body sustain the pressure? Headaches, vertigo persist. My vitals are normal, so it's not anything going on within. That's a you question. I can't answer that because, I mean, most people will go through their day totally fine with the solar energy and it doesn't affect them. And it's really actually not that intense right now. We're not getting nonstop X flares like we did in May of 2024. So you're gonna have to check in with yourself and then also do what you need to feel better, grounding, etc. And just because your vitals are normal doesn't mean that your everything is good. Let's just say that, okay? So I wish you the best, but I really can't help you beyond that. But just take steps to ground yourself, like learn about bioelectricity and find ways to discharge this energy through activity, through movement, and or through earthing, grounding, like swimming. All these are fantastic. Yin yoga is really good. You want to work with your fascia more. That's what I can give you some recommendations on. Thank you for the super thanks. Geraldine, thank you very much for the very generous super thanks. One of your recent videos was titled Stay Away. Are you suggesting we stay away from California, especially Southern California? Yeah, it was a little bit of just a play for YouTube and the algorithm. But I mean, I do think that California, especially Southern California, is looking really ripe for a big earthquake. So time will tell. If we get something big in the next month, then it's going to be, obviously, it would have been a good thing to have stayed away. But it could be 5 years from now. It's really hard to say. but we are in general in a time window where we can expect higher earthquake activity in California. There's like this 35-year periodicity that exists, and we're still kind of in that peak. So right now it's very critical for California because of everything I've outlined. So I think it's very possible, but California is one of the hardest places to forecast activity because it's a very unique plate junction with the used to having been subduction and now it's transform fault. So it's very wild. Thank you for the super thanks. Brazil area. We are between San Antonio and Austin. Will we get any shaking? Only if you get an earthquake, it's possible, but you shouldn't have, yeah, you definitely wouldn't have felt that. So it's possible though you get an earthquake, but if we go back to our map here, we see that there haven't been any earthquakes in the San Antonio, Austin area, magnitude 5 or greater ever. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but as of right now, it hasn't happened. So unlikely. Nevada, thank you for the super thanks. And Susan, thank you as well. Sherry, I sent you an email from your website. Please read it. Thank you so much for the super thanks. It's awesome. Okay, I'll look out for that. I can't promise I'll respond to it though, but yeah, I'll give it a look. Thank you so much. And Jenny, thank you for the super thanks as well. And I'll just take a couple from the main chat here. Is there an app for ear ringing yet? I don't think so. I mean, I know there's one app called Meteo app or Meteor app. I think it's METEO app, something like that. You can look that up, but you'd have to look. I have no idea. I don't really, I mean, I get ear ringing every now and then, but I don't think about it too much. It's just, I think it's a pretty normal thing. Yeah, and here's a great point by our moderator. If you are affected by space weather, it means you have damage somewhere. Sugar is like throwing gasoline on it. Absolutely. Inflammation is only going to make it worse. That's very clear, looking at the anecdotal and also just like studying a little bit about biology and health and wellness. And like a very common effect is if you have metal in your body. That's probably the most surefire bang case for space weather affecting you, is that if you have conductive metal in your body, you feel it. I mean, my one buddy, he's got metal all in his legs from a motorcycle accident, and you know, we've talked and met. And he watches my channel now every now and then, but there's many times when I've been like, "Hey, dude, we have space weather right now. Have you been feeling okay?" And he's like, "Bro, I've been feeling. I didn't even know." But you know, the metal picks that all up. So hip replacements, knee replacements, all these things is going to definitely affect that. It's like the most surefire bang case for that. The others are a little bit more nebulous and super individualistic, and you have to be mindful of like your own health and everything. And yes, I'm not a medical doctor. I do a lot of research into biology, health, and wellness. It's super, super important, but none of this is medical advice. Find a good natural holistic wellness practitioner or something and go into that. So I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you all so much, everyone, for tuning in today. I've been your Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy. Right before I go, a reminder that we have a sale right now on the website. So this is earthevolution.com/store. You can go to the energy analytics page to check out what's happening with the sun, the earth, and more. Here are the sunspots right now. They're on the sun. So a good amount of activity over the past few days. But if you go up to the store page, here you see it. These products, all organic wellness products that my dad and I supply to you, as well as some other vendors. We have some new products coming in soon, but you can use the code PLANETS, all one word, for 10% off. We've just shipped out a bunch of orders. We ran into some stocking issues, but that's solved now. So everyone's getting their orders that have ordered recently. And again, it's PLANETS, all one word, for 10% off. So I encourage you to go there. It's available to everyone in the United States. I will keep you up to date on what is happening here energetically with earthquakes, volcanoes, space weather, planetary alignments, cosmic forces, and more. So please subscribe. Thank you all so much. Smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. Wishing each and every single one of you well. If you felt this magnitude 5 in Texas, please leave a comment with your experience. If you feel so inclined to share, we'd like to hear your anecdotal experience. How long was the shaking? What was the shaking like? Did you hear anything? These sort of details are very valuable as it relates to building up an understanding of the event itself. So we'd appreciate that. And hopefully things cool down, but we are seeing activity build up across the United States. So I'll be back with more, I'm pretty sure, sooner rather than later as it relates to that. So thank you all. Have a great day. I'll see you all in the next video.